13 of the fantasy football season. And here's the top 12 defenses I'm ranking for this week. The first one, the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams here, it's been a tough few weeks for this team, and their defense hasn't played well. You thought we're getting Von Miller to Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey will be a lock-up defense, but that hasn't been the case over the last few weeks. Week 9 versus Tennessee, 22 points allowed, 3 sacks and interception. Week 10 at San Francisco, 25 points allowed, a sack. And Week 12 at the Packers, 30 points allowed, a sack and a fumble recovery. But right here, this defense, I think, gets good this week here with a great matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're really struggling this season. Trevor Lawrence can't move the ball well. James Robinson, he's been decent, but there's been so much he could do. And the Jaguars give up the second most fantasy points to defenses on the season. And I think the Rams have a good one this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if they score 15, 20 fantasy points. The next defense is the Indianapolis Colts in number 2. So the Indianapolis Colts, they've been good this season for the most part, especially the last few weeks, besides last week on the defensive end of things. And this week they got a great matchup at the Houston Texans that give up the 5th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So right here, Tyrod Taylor, we know is the starter. He's just not really good in my opinion. He's good for a couple of those, few sacks, and possibly a touchdown as well for this Colt defense. So the last few weeks for them, Week 10 versus Jacksonville, 17 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery, touchdown, and a block kick. Week 11 at Buffalo, 15 points allowed. They only held that offense to a sack, 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery. And last week in a tough matchup versus Tampa Bay, 38 points allowed, 2 sacks, an into, and a fumble recovery. So right here, mid-teens to 20s, I say they hold this Houston team to, and I think they're going to make some plays and be one of the top performers this week. The next defense, number 3, Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals coming off a bye week, getting some players back. Murray and Hopkins should be back on the offensive end for them. And they got a great matchup with the Chicago Bears. In my opinion, it doesn't matter who starts for this Bear team, Dalton or Fields, they're still going to have their way. But I think they have a bigger day if Justin Fields is going to start in this one. We know Fields, he looks to run a lot. Sometimes he gets too run happy and eyes down the receivers too much as well. So the last few weeks for this Arizona defense, Week 9 at San Francisco, 17 points allowed, 5 sacks and into, 2 fumble recoveries. Week 10 versus the Panthers, 34 points allowed, into, fumble recovery. And Week 11 at Seattle, 13 points allowed, 4 sacks in that one. So the Bears give up the 7th most, like I mentioned. And I think Arizona plays great defense, holds that offense down to the minimum amount of points, and they'll cause a few turnovers. Number 4, the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings here, we know they haven't been a great defense this season, but this is a 1-week play here is Minnesota with a good matchup at the Detroit Lions that can't move the football or really score, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few weeks here for the Vikings, like I mentioned, they don't do much really for fantasy. Week 10 at the Chargers, 20 points allowed, 2 sacks and into. Week 11 versus the Packers, 31 points allowed, 2 sacks. And Week 12 at San Francisco, 34 points allowed, 2 sacks, an interception, but a kick return touchdown. So this week here, Week 13 at Detroit, I think they're going to make a few plays here, get a few sacks on Jared Goff, and hold this team down to probably 13 to 20 point range. So I like them at number 4. Number 5, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Bucs have an amazing matchup this week at the Atlanta Falcons. I give up the most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So right here, this Buc team, in real life, they haven't been playing great defense in terms of points allowed and stuff, but the last few weeks for fantasy football, they've been pretty good. Week 10 at Washington, 29 points allowed, 5 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 11 versus the Giants, 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries in that one. And Week 12 at the Indianapolis Colts, they did give up 31 points, but 3 sacks, 2 intos, 3 fumble recoveries. So this defense has a knack for causing turnovers. And this week, they're going to cause turnovers on Matt Ryan and get a few sacks as well. So I think they easily could reach double digits if they just get things going like they have over the last few weeks. Number 6, the Miami Dolphins. So right here, the Miami Dolphins have a good matchup versus the New York Giants. And the Giants here are in trouble as well, where Daniel Jones with his neck issue, it looks like he's going to be out this week here. And the Giants give up the 12th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. And don't look now, this Miami Dolphin team, they've won 4 games in a row. And 3 of the 4 games, their defense for fantasy has had huge games. Week 9 versus Houston, 9 points allowed, 5 sacks, 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery. Week 10 versus Baltimore, another big game and an upset victory. 10 points, 4 sacks, an fumble recovery, and a touchdown. Week 11 at the Jets, 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then last week, they made Cam Newton look horrible in that one. 10 points allowed, 5 sacks, 3 intos, including a pick six and a block kick. So this week here, it's going to be the immortal Mike Lennon at quarterback for the New York Giants. And I don't see him moving the football much. Also, that the Dolphins are at home, they play better defense at home. And I could see them tee off on Glennon early and often in this one and have another big fantasy day this week. Number 7, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills here, what a great division matchup it's going to be with the Bills and the Patriots here on Monday Night Football. And the Bills here, their defense the last couple weeks has fizzled out a little. And now to lose Trevion White for the whole season is a huge loss at cornerback. So the last few games here for the Bills. Week 10 at the Jets, 17 points allowed, a sack, 4 interceptions, a fumble recovery in that one. In Week 11 versus the Colts, 41 points allowed, -3 fantasy points. And Week 12 with the Saints, they came back, played well in that one. 6 points allowed, 2 sacks, and an interception. But right here, I think this is a low 20s type of score with Buffalo and New England, where I could see it be a defensive type of matchup. But I don't think the Bills will have that big of a game. Maybe 8 or 9 fantasy points at most this week, because Mac Jones has been protecting the football well. They're run-first team over there in New England, and it's just going to be a lower score more than anything for these two defenses. Number 8, the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens, this season, their defense has been disappointing. And I know they have tons of injuries, including cornerback Marcus Peters, who was a big loss early in training camp. So the last few weeks, the defense has picked it up with weaker teams they've been versing. Week 10 at Miami, 16 points allowed, 4 sacks. Week 11 at Chicago, 13 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 12 versus Cleveland. That game for both teams was a slop fest, but they won it 16-10, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. And right here, Week 13, a good matchup at the Steelers. The Steelers are having trouble the last couple weeks here moving the football. I know their offense went off at the Chargers, but this Baltimore team and the Steelers, it's usually a defensive battle. And these two division rivals obviously know what the other offense is going to do. But Big Ben Roethlisberger looks washed up in my opinion. He's causing a lot of turnovers. He's taking big hits as usual. And right here, I think the Ravens in this one, they can hold this Steeler offense down anywhere from 13 to 20 points, get a few sacks, and maybe a couple turnovers. So this week here, I like them at number 8. Number 9, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs, the last month of the season, their defense has stepped up, and now they've been getting healthy as well and coming off a bye week rejuvenated. So winning 4 games in a row here is Kansas City. And it's been starting with the defense, believe it or not. They only scored 20 or more points twice in the 2 out of the 4 game winning streak. So Week 8 versus the Giants, 17 points allowed, 3 sacks in it though. Week 9 versus Green Bay, 7 points allowed, a sack and into fumble recovery, a block kick. Week 10 at Vegas, 14 points allowed, 2 sacks and into fumble recovery. And then Week 11 versus a high-powered Dallas Cowboy offense. They held them to 9 points with 5 sacks, 2 intos, and a fumble recovery. So Week 13 here on Sunday Night Football versus the Denver Broncos. I think they're going to get to Teddy Bridgewater early and often. I know Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon have been good running backs this season. But if the Chiefs could score this one and get off to a good lead, they're going to make this Bronco offense one-dimensional. And if it's going to be Bridgewater or Locke, depending who's going to play in this game, it don't matter either way, because I think the Chiefs, once again, have a great performance. And if they could shut down the Dallas Cowboy offense the way they did in Week 11, I think they could shut this Bronco offense down easily this week. Number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles defense been playing pretty well this season, but this week a great matchup at the New York Jets. Lost last week in MetLife Stadium, and now they're staying there to verse the Jets with the back-to-back New York ball games. So the last few games here for this Eagle defense. Week 10 at Denver, 13 points allowed, a sack, fumble recovery, touchdown, block kick. Week 11 versus the Saints, 29 points allowed, but had 2 intos, a fumble recovery, touchdown. And then last week versus the Giants, they didn't really do stats, but only 13 points allowed and a sack. So Zach Wilson's back in the lineup for the Jets. In my opinion, he looks lost out there. I know he's a rookie, but this year he's just not getting the job done. And I think the Eagles in this one They're going to play this Jet team tough. They need to bounce back and win after they should have won that game at the Giants, but drop passes and Jalen Hurts throwing too many intos cost them in that one. But I think this defense comes out and plays good once again and has a top 10 performance. And number 10, number 11, the New England Patriots. And the Patriots, no doubt about it, have a very tough matchup this week here. Is New England versus the Buffalo Bills. But this game I could see be a defensive type of battle. And the last 5 or 6 weeks, this Patriot defense has been the best defense in fantasy football. No doubt about it with the points they've been putting up. Week 9 at Carolina, 6 points allowed, a sack, 3 interceptions, and a pick 6. Week 10 versus Cleveland, 7 points allowed, 5 sacks, an interception. Week 11 at Atlanta, 4 sacks, a shutout pitched, 4 interceptions, and a pick 6. And then week 12 versus Tennessee Titan team, 13 points allowed, 2 sacks, an intho, 3 fumble recoveries. So this week here, Buffalo, I see the Bills scoring points, but like I mentioned, they definitely could be in the low 20s. Could sack Josh Allen a few times in this game, and I still got to put them in the top 12 this week here because this defense has been playing lights out, and their potential is unlimited, even though they're versing a very tough offense in Buffalo in the 12th and final defense I'm ranking this week's the San Francisco 49ers. So the 49ers have been playing great football over the last month of the season here, winning the last 4 out of 5 games. And this defense, they're starting to kick it into gear, and they got a good matchup here week 13 at Seattle. This Seattle offense, for whatever reason, it's just been abysmal for them. They looked bad on Monday night at Washington, lost that ball game. Russell Wilson isn't 100%, I think. And DK Metcalf, he just can't get separation and get open over the last few weeks. I definitely could Seattle turn the corner in this game and have a big game, but the way things are going, I got to rank San Francisco at 12 here. Week 10 versus the Rams, a great offense. 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 intros, and a pick 6. Week 11 at Jacksonville, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. And last week versus a good Minnesota offense, 26 points allowed, a sack, an intro, and a fumble recovery. So this week here, NFC West matchup at Seattle, and I think they can make a few plays in this ball game here, is the San Francisco 49ers. And their routine is run the football, kill the clock, and play good defense. And that recipe's been working over the last 5 weeks of the season here. And I think this week at Seattle, they can hold them down to 13, 20-point range and get a few turnovers and a few sacks. And I think they have a decent game. So that's the top 12 defenses I'm ranking for week 13 of the fantasy football season.